Welcome back here to the whole nine yards. Drew Pien here with Brandon Krikorian. Brandon, how's it going?
Good man. Excited to talk about the two games, three, really just game four, honestly. But excited for this episode, honestly.
Yeah, no, Sam. Game four, finally, I think it was the first good game of the finals, really. The first game that was, had you glued to the TV. The other three games, if we did do the thing where we kind of made videos like right after the finals, we could have made those videos in like the third quarter of those games, pretty much. Game four, down to the wire. Good game. I mean, I guess my first takeaway from the game was, well, actually, my first takeaway was when I got on my phone, everyone was complaining about the Devin Booker, his like what would have been the sixth foul.
Yeah,
And I mean, my first take is, I guess, I don't know why people really care about it because it didn't. I mean, one, the Bucks won, so it didn't really matter. But I mean, I think there were many bigger issues on the Suns. I don't know. It's just the complaining about the refs thing was a little bit weird, but I don't know. It was a great game. Chris Paul. I mean, I wasn't necessarily happy to see him have a bad fourth game, but I wasn't crying about it. I wasn't sad. There are many that definitely were sad. Our Bucks and seven prediction to me is looking great. I think it's looking pretty good.
yeah,
I think the Bucks have the momentum. I think you could argue both ways. The Suns could also be looking at it like, okay, Chris Paul just played horrible. We got outshot. Like they did, the Bucks just took more shots and we almost won that game. But the Bucks could also look at it like we have all the momentum. Giannis is dominant. Chris Middleton finally just had an awesome game. He might be good for now for the rest of the series. We'll see. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's ways to look at it that you could, if you're a fan of either team, you're happy. But to me, I love my Bucks and seven pick still. I guess my immediate prediction I'll just give right off the rip is I think Phoenix probably wins game five. I think the Bucks win game six, and I think the Bucks can steal game seven on the road. The Bucks could also win game five, and then Phoenix, or maybe they win game five and six. I don't know, but that would be my, if I'm sticking to Bucks and seven, that would be my,
that'd be the path to how you
yeah,
think
that'd be
it'll
my
go.
my ideal path.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with Chris Paul. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say I was happy to see it, but I was definitely. But I think I agree exactly what you said. I wasn't mad about it. It was it was just a terrible game for him. I mean, I think he had, and we saw it in game two. I mean, even though they won game two, he had six turnovers in that game, and I think he still had 20 points. And it was kind of that game was obviously if anyone else on the Bucks, did anything else in that game besides Giannis, the Bucks probably win that game. But he had a really bad game that game, but it kind of got brushed under because they won. Game three, he wasn't great. But that game three was kind of a game where you almost expected the Bucks to win. Going back to home court, first time in the finals since '71. You're down 2-0. It seems like a game you're almost going guaranteed to win. And obviously they did. It was kind of a blowout that game. But this game, he just again not a great game. I mean, 5 of 13 from the field. It was missing a lot of open shots. He just seemed like the mid range shot was not falling. The layups really weren't going in. Over 2 from three. He was a -10, the worst on the Suns out of anyone. And like I said, 5 turnovers. I mean, this is a guy who basically in the first 3 rounds turned the ball over like I don't know what the number would be, but like basically rather like 1 time a game or like 0 times a game. Like he was not turning the ball over. He's never been like that historically. So the last 3 games, he's turned the ball over, I think, over 20 times, which is crazy to think about, or around 20 times, I guess. So just not just too careless with the ball. He had the big play at the end of the game coming off the screen that he just lost his balance, lost the ball, led to that was the Devin Booker play where for some reason Devin Booker was trying to take a foul there. I don't know why he was trying to do that at that point in the game because he would have fouled out. It should have been a foul. I agree with you. It wasn't like the biggest deal because they still scored on that play, and obviously the Bucks still won. But I don't know what he was doing, trying to take a foul there. Just let them score. It's 2 points. I think the score. I think they were rather down 2 points, or it was a tie game. I think they were down 2 points at that time. So whatever, you're down four. It's not the biggest deal. So that was definitely a weird play, but it was just a crazy game. I mean, the Suns were up 9 early in the game. They were up 9 in the fourth quarter. It seemed like I was watching, and it seemed like the Bucks like should have been winning the game almost. Like it seemed like they were kind of outplaying them. Again, Suns had 17 turnovers, allowed 17 offensive rebounds, which, like you said earlier, that led to so many shot attempts by the Bucks. And it just seemed like the Bucks should have been winning the entire game. And for some reason, they were always down 5 to 10 points. But then that fourth quarter, just great plays offensively, great plays defensively by Giannis. We can probably get into that play on the Ayton alley-oop, but just a great overall win for the Bucks. And if they lose this game, the series is probably over in 5, honestly, at least the way I would see it. But they win this game, our predictions are looking good at Bucks in 7.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree on that.
And I mean, I guess we can get into the Giannis play. I mean that they were talking about it today on a lot of the sports shows about like the importance of that block, and a lot of people are saying it's somewhat overrated. I think that was just one. It was an amazing play, but I think it is very important because at that point in the game, it was 101 to 99. The Chris Middleton just hit a shot, and we could talk about him probably right after this. He was spectacular in this game with his big shot ability. This is something that they need him to do more, going forward, obviously. But that block, I mean, if the Suns get that basket right there, it's a tie game with basically a minute left. Chris Middleton, the next possession, missed a jump shot. They got the rebound. He missed another jump shot. So imagine that happens. It's a tie game instead of being up 2. Just a huge play by Giannis there. I mean, to just be able to stick out on, I think it was Chris Paul or it was Devin Booker on that screen. If you don't hedge out enough, then he's probably shooting and he's probably scoring. I mean, again, he had 42 points last night. And then if you sag off, like I said, you sag off too much, he's probably scoring there. If you push up too much, then it's wide open for the alley-oop. So it was a great play by him. An amazing block that definitely saved the game for them. Because then the next time the Suns had the ball, that's when Chris Paul had the turnover. So it was just an amazing play. And when I was watching, I honestly kind of stood up because of how I didn't think he was going to be able to block that. I thought he was going to foul him, or he was going to get an and one, or he's just be able to just miss it. It was just an incredible play.
I 100% agree. It's the closest thing to I mean, it does not compare at all to the blocked by LeBron in Game 7 of 2016.
Yeah.
But for a Game 4 of a Phoenix Milwaukee NBA Finals, I mean, that's as close as you're going to get to just that could be the best play of Giannis's career. I mean, or at least the one that you look at and kind of defines his career. Just I feel like most players, especially most players that have to carry the load like a LeBron in a Game 4 like this, I don't see a lot of players making that play. And just Giannis, unlike pretty much all superstars in the league, other than maybe Westbrook back in the day, and I guess still today, but there's the fact that he's always giving everything on every play. He's never taking plays off. There's not many people in the league that make that play. I think Giannis is really one of the only ones, if not the only one. It was a great play. Obviously, it was pretty much, I mean, in hindsight, that was the game. I mean, you get the block, and then with a minute left, and obviously the Bucks end up winning. It was a huge play. And if the Bucks do go on to win the finals, this is going to be 100%, unless something crazy happens in Game 5, 6, or 7. Unless we have like a 2016 Game 7 finals type of game, this is going to be the game we look back at and say, that play by Giannis is almost what gave them this series. And on the Suns side, if Chris Paul doesn't, if he has a B+ game, they're probably winning this game, and that's how the Suns would have won. So honestly, as an NBA fan and having my anti Chris Paul bias, if I could have the finals going away, it would probably be Bucks in 7, and then we end up looking back at this Game 4 and saying, what a play by Giannis, Middleton with a huge game, and then we look right at Chris Paul and we say, for everything about being a leader in your whole 16-year career, you've pretty much everything lined up for you to get to this finals. And Game 4, you just laid the biggest egg when, obviously Devin Booker went for 42. You can't lose this game, especially if the Phoenix Suns lose this series. This is a game you can't lose.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Paul, turnover at 3:44 left in the fourth, gets a shot blocked at 3:18 by Giannis. He I think he did make, yeah, obviously the pass he Ayton, that it was a little high. So I mean, you can somewhat say, or that was Booker, I should say, but he had a turnover with 32 seconds left. He missed another shot late in that game. So just a bad last 4 minutes for him. And he basically went from, I would say, when he came back from the COVID protocols in the Western Conference Finals, since then to game two, he was basically like, everyone. I mean, you could not talk about Chris Paul and how good he was in those games. The closeout game against the Clippers, just the games he was having in the first two games against the Bucks, just everything that he was doing, and then the last two games, how much it's turned itself over, especially this game. I mean, I agree. Like, if they lose this series, you can 100% look back at this game. This is his best chance for a finals. I think we can all understand that, with him at least being one of the lead players on that team. So if they lose this finals and this is the game to look back on, now Giannis and Middleton will get a ton of credit for it. But I think a lot of the blame, most of the blame, I think has to go on Chris Paul because Booker showed up. Ayton wasn't great, but I'm not expecting him to be great every single game. I'm expecting Paul to be great. And Paul was not even close to being at all at that standard. So for him to have this performance in this game, it brings back some memories of like 2013, 2014, 2016, 2018. So that's not stuff you want when you're Chris Paul. If you're a Chris Paul fan, that's not things that you want to be seeing on social media. And, you have 3 days before every finals game, which is so much time. I think it's so ridiculous that they have so much time between games. But the next game is Saturday, so we'll see it happen Saturday. I think we both think the Suns will probably win that game. I think it'll just be, back on home court. You lose two, you go back in your fans, probably have a better game overall, make some adjustments. Paul's probably going to have a better game, you would assume. So I think we kind of expect the Suns to win that game, but this was just a terrible performance by him. And it's just not one that you really want if you're a Chris Paul guy.
Yeah, especially, I mean, you're up 2-0, you're up 2-1. I mean, you had the Bucks by, their antlers. You had, your foot. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. This was the game to win. This would have capped off essentially Chris Paul's 16-year career and made it all worth it. All of the haters like me and many others saying, he's a locker room cancer. He's, I think he's very similar to Jimmy Butler in a way where it's like, he can't really be the guy unless there's no other guys in the locker room / all the guys are 22, 24. But yeah, I was going to say something else too, but I kind of forgot what I was going to say.
Well, I was going to talk about Jrue Holiday. He's just been terrible these first 4 games. I mean, they won games 3 and 4, but he was 4-20 last night, 0-5 from 3. He had some big offensive rebounds, and his defense has definitely stepped up. He's definitely been better on Paul than he was the first 2 games, but they need something offensively out of him. I mean, he played 43 minutes and scored 13 points. And there were times where he was kind of waving off Giannis and Middleton when clearly they should have been getting the ball. I just don't understand how you could keep having these games. It's, again, in the Atlanta series, he definitely was better, but basically throughout the entire playoffs, he's been pretty bad, and most of the time very inconsistent. So just for him to be this bad, I just don't understand it. I mean, he's a good shooter. He's around like a 50, 40, 90 guy. He's like in that area. So I don't understand why he's such a bad shooter. He can definitely get his own basket sometimes, but it seems like he just, I don't know. He was missing point blank layups yesterday. Again, 0-5 from 3. It definitely had wide open opportunities. It just seems like he needs to step up if they're going to win the series. I know they've won 2 without him playing really well, but you almost have to expect that he has to play better for them to win. Again, now it's a best of 3 series. You have to win 2 of the next 3. So you need him to play better in at least one of those games, because if he doesn't, you need Middleton to put up this performance again. And, the past tells you that he's probably not going to keep doing this. He's probably going to have one bad game in there. So you just need Jrue Holiday to step up in one of these next 3 games.
He needs to step up in at least one of these next 3 games. Giannis has to play well. I agree with you. Middleton's probably going to have one game where he just doesn't play well. I mean,
yeah,
we've seen it. That's kind of who he is. If you exclude game 3, because I mean, his stats aren't horrible on paper for game 3 just because the game was a blowout. But I mean, game 1 shot 0 for 4 from 3, then 1 for 3 in game 2, 0 for 5 in game 3, like you said. 4 for 14 from the field game 1, 7 for 21 game 2, 4 for 20 game 3, and he's playing 40 plus minutes a game. It's tough. Obviously, he still provides value defensively, but it's puzzling. I didn't think that Jrue Holiday would be a guy that I mean, I didn't view him as somebody who was clutch or whatever, but I didn't think he would. I don't know if he's laid an egg these playoffs, but he certainly hasn't lived up to what Bucks fans would have hoped. It's almost similar to Eric Bledsoe. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
Eric Bledsoe's a guy who I kind of viewed as a choker in the playoffs. I didn't view Holiday in that same way, but that's also probably because he's just, other than that, his early career in the Sixers, I don't think he's really made the playoffs. So he has to step it up more than just being an all defense guy. He's going to have one game where he goes for 25 on 5 for 9 from three or something like that. I mean, he has to have a game where he does that and he gets a few key defensive stops late in the fourth quarter, or else the Suns may win the series, even though I'm not predicting it. I still think there will be a moment where Holiday's able to come in and have a big game where maybe Chris Middleton doesn't play nearly as well, and Giannis needs some help to, take the offensive load off him so he can still continue to play all these minutes at, 110% level.
yeah. And even if it's not 20 to 25, even it's just like an efficient 15 to 18. I mean, I think that's just 1,000 times better than going 4 for 20 and possibly costing your team a victory. So as long as he can keep that defensibility at the level that it's at right now, and just even if it's 15 points, but he's like, let's say he's like 5 for 7 or 5 for 8, and he's made like 2 for 3 from three. Like that's just a completely better game than what he's doing right now. So as long as he steps it up, I really like their chances. I still like him right now. I think we both really are really high on them right now. I think we still were even before. But if he can step up just a little bit offensively, just be a little bit more efficient, I just think that it's their series, honestly. And again, we think Game 5 is the Suns, but Game 6, that's going to be a tough game. Even if the Bucks are down 3-2, I just really like them in that game. And then of course I'd like them in Game 7.
Yeah, I think game 7 is where anything can happen. Game 5, I mean, we've seen the home teams have been the teams that have won
Yeah.
games. I expect that to be similar in game 5. Going back to Phoenix, Chris Paul, I mean, the crowd's going to be cheering for him. The crowd's going to be cheering for D-Book. They're going to go off probably. It's going to be tough for Milwaukee to win 3 in a row. I don't know that Giannis is going to be able to play as well in all these games. He didn't have a 40 plus point game, but will he still be, he was still at a great game just watching the game. Middleton is obviously, I mean, he's probably not going to score 40 again in these finals. So yeah, I like Phoenix in game 5. Hopefully Milwaukee wins game 6. I would expect them to. And then game 7, it's a coin flip. I mean,
Yeah.
anything can happen in a game 7, but
But
I'm betting on Giannis.
yeah.
Oh, what I was
And
gonna say actually was I'm not like a Giannis lover or hater, but it will be, it is nice to kind of see the Giannis haters just kind of like proved wrong in a way. Maybe I'm kind of a Giannis hater, but I think there are people that were very anti Giannis. Like there are people that going into the series that thought Chris Paul was the best player in this series. I mean, even I think I forget if I reacted to it or not, but I Colin Coward had Giannis as his third best player in the finals. Um, I mean, like that is egregious, and we've
yeah.
clearly seen ever since game 1 that, I mean, Giannis is by far the best player on the court when he's on the court. So it is nice. I mean, I'm not going to go overboard on the Giannis love, just because next year he probably won't make it to the finals. He'll probably get gentlemen swept by the Nets, if we're being honest. But yeah, it is nice to see Giannis proving to people that Chris Paul is definitely not the best player in this series.
Yeah, and I was actually kind of thinking that same exact thing. I'm not a big Giannis guy, I never really was, but watching these finals, I've found myself, and I know I picked Bucks in 7, but even if I didn't, I kind of found myself rooting for Giannis more. I think so far in this series, he's kind of, he's always been more of like a passive kind of guy. And we've seen that with the minutes that he's played. And I know you could say that's coaching, but if you want to play more minutes in like a playoff game, you could just tell your coach you're not coming out or put me back in the game. He's been more like passive, obviously, on the court, in that he's doesn't always seem to want to get the shot. And now Middleton's been great a lot of these times, and he's more of the closer, but there's times where he's definitely more passive on the court with the ball than he really should be, when he clearly has a better matchup, or he should just be attacking the basket. But in this series, he's been dominating. I mean, when he's on, there's really no one on the Suns who could stop him, and that's definitely one of the problems with the Suns, is that their lack of depth in that kind of big man size, and no one to spell Aiden when he's tired. and to guard Giannis, at least throw a body at him, is just very concerning. Your best guy is probably Crowder, but he's just a body. He's never going to actually do anything, and he's honestly just going to foul him, like 80% of the time. So that's definitely the biggest problem for the Suns right now is that they have no one to back up Ayton and no one to throw a body at Giannis because the Bucks found something with the small lineup that no team's been able to do against the Suns the entire playoffs is go small against them because obviously Ayton can stay on the court, but if you go small, you're gonna get killed on the boards and you're probably gonna get killed in the paint also, which is what they've been doing to every team in the West. But the Bucks have just found a way. Giannis has been able to stop Ayton, and again, Ayton's last couple of games have not been great at least offensively. Still on the boards, he's doing great, but again, he's the biggest guy on the court. But they've just found a lineup that really works with Connaughton. I thought Lopez would be bigger in this series, but again, they just found something with the small lineup. And if it works, it works. You keep going with it, and obviously, it has been working. So that's definitely a lot of credit to Coach Bud. I know he's been getting a lot of hate throughout the entire playoffs, but I think he's coached a pretty good series, and you could say Giannis and Middleton have kind of carried that. But I think he's had a pretty good rotation, his lineups, his defensive adjustments. I think you had to give a lot of credit to Coach Bud with that.
100%. Yeah, I need to give credit to Coach Bud just because I was a guy who was like, Nets are winning the series, and pretty much just fire him. I mean, get him out of here. I've never been a big fan of him ever since the Atlanta days. I mean, he was a hell of a coach. I think he won Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
But I mean, I knew that team was never really legit. Obviously, I mean, with LeBron in the East, they weren't legit. Never really a big fan of Coach Bud on the Bucks, but he's at a hell of a series. And actually, I was thinking about this a couple of days ago. I was just thinking like, if the Bucks win or lose this finals, could I just fire Coach Budenholzer? And I mean, obviously, I mean, the easy answer is no, but I still, even if the Bucks win the series and Budenholzer looks as good as he's looked, which isn't Popovich level of genius mastermind, but he's looked very good. He's looked competent, which you could say he hasn't before, but he's been making adjustments, or he's at least been trying to. But that being said, I don't have faith for him going forward. I've seen too much of him. Even if he has one good series, that's one good series compared to the multiple years of he can't really do much. And honestly, if there's no injuries, he's not even having the opportunity to be in this series. So let's say the Bucks win the series in 7. I mean, you can't, but I would want to fire Budenholzer.
Yeah, I mean, like I see what you're saying. Obviously, they just wouldn't do that unless Giannis said something, but I don't think he would. But if they were to lose this series and it was because of his coaching, I think there's definitely a real possibility that he could get fired still. Even at that point, I don't know. But if there's like a big, he just does something that's like, I don't know, like what's he doing out there? Possibly that cost them a game. But it's funny how he literally went from being fired, like he was fired basically in that Nets series to now possibly having a chance to win an NBA Finals and then probably getting an extension or something like that. So it's crazy how that turns out that he was literally fired when they were down to the Nets. And look at him now, he's in the finals and he has a pretty good chance, I would say, at winning. And it's just crazy how that turns around. But I do see what you're saying. There's definitely, I think some people may think that, even though let's say he wins, like, he's still not the greatest coach, but it's just hard to fire someone when you win an NBA Finals.
It is super difficult. If we exclude like any problems that would happen in the locker room, let's just say all the players and stuff are super obedient. If I didn't have to worry about that, I would fire Budenholzer if the Bucks won the finals or lost. I would fire him just because I just don't think he's a great coach. I think he's competent, but I don't know that he's the guy to lead this Bucks team, excluding this year because of injuries. I don't think he's the guy that can lead this team to a legitimate, I mean, I don't want to say legitimate, but a finals where you have to go through a healthy Brooklyn and a healthy, Philadelphia or / Atlanta. So I would actually fire Budenholzer. Obviously, in the real world, they won't, even if they lose a series, unless Budenholzer does some all-time, like Shaq and a fool, but for a head coach type of thing. Like he's not going to get fired. But if I could fire him, I genuinely would.
The only question would be who would replace him, because at this point, every single team except for Washington has a head coach, but it seems like they're going to have Wes Unseld Jr. as their head coach. Now, their assistant, Darvin Ham, was like a guy who was probably in most of the candidates. And again, this is obviously just all, not, just like hypothetical, but if they were to fire him, it would just be who would replace him, unless you're going to bring up your assistant to be your head coach, which I mean, I guess you could, obviously, but I think the only you know, way that someone would say obviously not to fire him, even if he had a terrible coaching mistake, would just be like, there's no one really out there to replace him on that team.
Nobody off the top of my head, but I mean, like a guy like a Brad Stevens, like these, random guys, not random, like obviously people knew who Brad Stevens was, but I mean, I'm not going to come with a replacement, but assuming I mean, I don't know. It's tough to say, assuming there's a guy who's better than Budenholzer, I'd fire Budenholzer, but I just, regardless of the replacement, I don't think Budenholzer's guy who would lead the Bucks to past a healthy Nets or a healthy Sixers with a functioning Ben Simmons or a healthy Atlanta that's continuing to develop, even if Boston becomes a thing again or Miami becomes a thing again.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could see if that possibly happens. Again, I'd be surprised by that, but it's definitely a possibility, though, I would say.
Yeah.
But I guess that was probably it for Game 4. I had one other thing I was going to say, and you touched on it earlier, but if you're the Suns, the only positive you could probably take away from this was that you had 17 turnovers, you gave up 17 offensive rebounds. You got outshot by, I think you got outshot by like 20 shots, I think. And you probably still should have won that game, and you still only lost by 6 points. So that's definitely the positive to take away from it, is that you were leading basically the entire game. Chris Paul had probably one of his worst performances that he's had in a really long time. And you just were terrible on the glass and then with your turnovers. And you still had a chance to win. So that's the positive to take away if you're a Phoenix Suns fan.
I think it's a legitimate take too. I mean, the Suns won the first 2 games. Yeah, I mean, Milwaukee pretty much has to win Game 3, or else it's a sweep or a gentleman's sweep. They win Game 3, it's a blowout. It wasn't. I feel like that's pretty expected. Game 4 obviously was more of a toss up. The Bucks win it in a really close game. I mean, realistically, if you asked which team has outplayed the other more out of these first 4 games, I would probably give the slight edge to Phoenix, just because I don't know how much I can value Game 3, just because the Bucks have to have it. They're literally fighting for their lives. Budenholzer's potentially even fighting for his job. Giannis is fighting. I mean, they had to have that game. Game 4, Bucks barely won. So I think you could genuinely argue the Suns have outplayed the Bucks. With that being said, like I've said, I'm still going with the Bucks in 7, but yeah.
All right. I guess moving topics, I have a trade proposal that I want to see what you would say to. It seems like we're done with the finals, unless you had anything else to say about it.
No, yeah, I want to hear it.
So this is something I kind of saw online, and I was somewhat thinking about the player that could possibly be moved, thinking that seems like where his market would be, maybe a little bit more, but it seems like this is where market possibly could be. So it was Ben Simmons to the Kings for Buddy Hield, Marvin Bagley, and a first-round pick. And I want to know what your thoughts on that would be.
Well, my very first thought was, if I'm the Sixers, no. Buddy Hield to me is a guy who, I mean, he's either a 6-man of the year type of guy, or he's just like a okay starter, I guess. He can shoot the ball. He can kind of create his own shot a little bit, but he's not that valuable. Marvin Bagley, he's a lottery ticket at this point. I mean, there's a chance he works out, but if it's anything like Sacramento, he's just a certified bust at the 2nd overall pick. So, sure, that has some value, but not an immense amount of value. I think he has a shot if he goes to another team. I think Sacramento is just a bad franchise, and clearly it was just never going to work there. But to me, it's still just not, he doesn't carry much value. And then a first-round pick, would it be Sacramento's unprotected first?
I didn't get to see exactly. I just saw a first-round pick.
We'll just say it's Sacramento's unprotected first-round pick next year. I'm assuming they still have it. If they don't, whatever, for the purpose of this exercise, I still wouldn't do it. I mean, they're probably not a playoff team next year, but they're going to be competitive. They're not going to have a top 4 pick odds, especially if they get Ben Simmons. They'll be vying for a playoff spot with Fox, Simmons. I don't know how that would specifically really work out. I don't think there's much chemistry there, but they would still be a good enough team to the point where you're probably not getting the first overall pick and getting yourself. I forget what draft class. I think it's Chet Holmgren, but yeah, to me, if I'm the Sixers, no. If I'm the Kings, I mean, of course, I would do it, to be honest. I still think Simmons has immense potential I know it's if he develops a shot, which you can pretty much say about almost any person in the NBA. You said it about Rondo all those years. You said it about literally like half the draft prospects that you could even think about. That's the first thing that, half the players in this class, like Scotty Barnes, a bunch of those players, it's like if they develop a jump shot, well, sometimes it just doesn't happen. Most of the time it doesn't happen, but Simmons still has immense potential. At the very worst, he's a defensive player of the year candidate, all first, all second team defense guy every single year who can still play make, he can still get to the rim. If he can be slightly more aggressive, which to me is much more realistic than him developing a jump shot, although I still think that has a slight puncher's chance at happening. He's a guy who can be a number 3 on a championship team. He's a guy who can get shooters open. If you could build around him. I don't know that Sacramento's the spot, but to me, Bagley's kind of gone regardless, in my opinion. I don't know that he's really here, and if he is here, he's half-assing it. Who are the other guys? Buddy Hield to me just doesn't have the value. He's CJ McCollum I would still consider low value for Simmons. And I don't think I wouldn't do that. I definitely wouldn't do Hield, and the first round pick's nice, but it's not anything special.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of thinking the same thing. I mean, it seems like the Sixers said they wanted like an all-star type player. Obviously, you wouldn't be getting that in Buddy Hield or Marvin Bagley. That would leave a hole at point guard for the Sixers. Obviously, Simmons obviously was your point guard. You never really had a backup point guard. I would like Buddy Hield kind of to be on the Sixers. I think that is a good fit, but I just think that the trade, from the Sixers point of view, wouldn't work out. But if they could somehow get Buddy Hield in just like a different trade, I think that would definitely benefit them. They kind of got that in Seth Curry last year, but I think Hield, if he's in the right situation, I think he can prove. He has kind of proven it on the Kings. I think like 2 years ago, he had a pretty good year. That he could be an efficient 3-point scorer. Obviously, he's not going to give you much defensively, but he could be a pretty good scorer. Obviously, from 3, he's going to be better. A guy who can come off the bench and just basically just get points. I think that's something that you could always use. But for Simmons, I mean, it's just weird what the market is going to be like. I said when I started this that this seems like this possibly could be the market, only because what team is really willing to give up an all-star type player for Simmons, unless it's a guy who's rather has a bad contract, or a guy who is just sort of going near the end of their prime, or just not as big on that team as he probably should be. So it's kind of weird what the market or what team will really give up that kind of player, and then what else, like a draft pick, another guy. Will the Sixers have to throw in someone else? So I just really don't know where he'd land, and it seems like he's going to get traded. I guess I'll say that it doesn't seem like he's going to be a Sixer next year. I'd be very surprised if he was. I don't think he's personally requested a trade, but it seems like the Sixers are pretty, they're pretty set on trading him before the season starts, possibly even before the draft starts. I mean, that's July 29th, so we'll see. But I just really don't know what team he'd go to. I just don't. Again, Portland's been out there, but I don't think McCollum. I don't think he's enough. Again, the Kings possibly. The Thunder, they were saying maybe like a Kemba Walker trade. But that's an injured point guard that you're getting back. I don't know what his value really is. So it's just I don't know. Yeah, I don't think that, unless he's healthy, which again you can't really bank on. If he's healthy, it's obviously it would work out. But again, you can't bank on that. So I just don't know what his market is. I really don't.
I actually have a hot take. I'm disagreeing with you. I think, and I feel strongly that Ben Simmons will be a 76er for at least this year. My reasoning behind it is just the 76ers, there's rumors that they're looking around. I don't see an agreement being made. To me, if you're the Sixers, you're selling on Simmons at an all-time low by a solid amount, a significant amount. And it is concerning if you're another team, if you're Portland, do I want to even give it McCollum? Obviously, Lillard McCollum just isn't championship quality, but even then, what is Simmons going to give me? Can he work with Lillard? He's, a lot of teams could look at him and say, if he can't play offense, if he can't shoot the ball, and you can't really, he's not good enough to build around to be a championship contender like a Giannis would be, then his value is almost just not there. But I still think the 76ers are going to think his value is there. I just don't think a team will be able to meet eye to eye with Philadelphia on what, they need to actually give up for Simmons. I would be shocked. You're not going to get a Lillard form, even if it's like a Simmons, Maxey, Thibault, and 5 first-round picks. I don't think the Portland Trailblazers would do that, and I don't know that they should do that. I don't even know if the Sixers would want to give up all that. I think they would, but I don't think teams are going to be able to meet eye to eye. I think the 76ers still have yet to realize that. I think they're going to be scoping, but they're probably looking to get a guy like a Lillard or a guy like, maybe like a McCollum, but a McCollum and a bunch of stuff. Or I'm trying to think of other guys that have been rumored, but it isn't going to happen. They're not going to get a Lillard type guy. You could get a McCollum type guy, but the Sixers aren't going to want to do McCollum straight up for Simmons. They'd want it to be McCollum and more, or, insert other player who's like McCollum and more, like maybe a Buddy Hield and more, but I don't think that's enough. I don't see these teams meeting eye to eye, and I think they just run it back. I think they run it back, and I've been a guy who's wanted to blow it up, and I probably would have tried to find a way to blow it up. Maybe not blow it up entirely, but change things up. But now's not the time to me. Your time was a couple years ago, or last year, or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago. Your time's not now. Now's the time where it's like Simmons is worth virtually nothing. He's worth a piece that won't make you a contender. I don't see the point in trading anything. I think you run it back. Clearly you choked this year, but if you play to your potential, you still beat Atlanta, and then you give Milwaukee a hell of a series, and that series goes maybe 7. I mean, before Philly choked, there were people that picked the Sixers to make it to the finals, and clearly they were wrong, but there's a reason they picked them to go to the finals. They were the 1 seed. I don't see the point in blowing it up right now.
Yeah, and I could definitely see them holding on to him and then possibly trading him at the trade deadline next season. If he has a good first couple months, even before the deadline, anytime before that, if he has a good couple months, he comes back. Even if his shot isn't like he's not shooting the ball, like, having a better shot, as long as he's just more confident in himself. Again, the defense is going to be there. You don't have to worry about that. But as long as he's more aggressive with the ball in his hands, I think they definitely could flip him at the deadline or something. You definitely get more value at that point than you would right now. So I could definitely see that happening also. Again, if the right trade's not out there, then you're just not going to trade him. That's just not how it works. It's not a guy who Simmons isn't a guy who they're just willing to get rid of at any cost. They obviously want something back in return that's going to help them become, even more of a championship contender. So I could definitely see that. It just seems like he's going to get traded. And again, I'm pretty sure he hasn't requested a trade, but he probably has, honestly. It just hasn't come out, to be honest. But I don't know. I really do see him get traded this offseason. Whether it's before the draft, I think it's a little too soon. Again, that's July 29th. It's only like 2.5 weeks away. Or right after. I just definitely see it happening. But again, there's definitely that possibility that he doesn't get traded, and then he either sticks on the team for all of next year, or he gets traded at the deadline or something, or it's just the same thing next offseason. So a lot of things to see with Simmons, obviously.
Let's say Philly does trade, Simmons for a package like Buddy Hield, Bagley in a first, or like a straight up swap from a McCollum or something like that, something that's not a Lillard or a Lillard type player, that's the 76ers will 100% regret that in my mind, because those types of packages just don't transform you from whatever you are now to a championship contender. You have a better shot at winning a championship with Simmons than with that type of package like that, in my opinion, still. Maybe that, kind of changes your timeline as an organization for competing. So you can kind of, push it back a couple of years. But with Embiid's injury history and 7 foot, 200, whatever, 300, whatever pound centers don't last very long. It's just, I don't think those trades are worth it. I think the 76ers would get it a lot. And I think if Simmons does get traded and he gets to go to a place where he can flourish or even just be what he has been, the 76ers are 100% going to regret it. it's a little bit recency bias to me. I mean, I'm not a Simmons lover, but I just, I feel like this is all just because he choked in the playoffs. And yes, it was horrendous. It's horrible, but am I going to trade this guy at an all-time low just because, he didn't take a shot in the fourth quarter when he clearly should have just dunked the ball? I mean, maybe, but to me, no. I don't see it. The 76ers would regret it. To me, that would be, I think that with Simmons and Embiid, there's at least a puncher's chance that they could potentially at some point get to a championship, legit championship team. But if you trade him for Bagley, Healed, and a first, I would never predict the 76ers winning the finals in with that era, with that core.
Yeah. That would, yeah. I mean, obviously, I like getting a guy who's not even an all-star type player. I mean, McCollum and Heald they've never even made it. Or maybe McCollum's made like one all-star, but
He hasn't made a single one.
he hasn't. All right. So neither of them have even made an all-star. So I do agree, obviously, like that's not the trade. It had to be something better than that. But I think the Simmons problem's been a problem for the last, 2 to 3 years. And I think it just exposed itself more in the playoffs, obviously, with what happened in that Atlanta series. But I think it's something that the Sixers have just been trying to push away the last couple of years instead of addressing it. So I think they should probably address it this offseason. I think it's the perfect time. And I know he's at an all-time low trade value, but you had the last two off seasons to possibly trade him, and you would have got 10 times more as much value as you would get right now. Because at some point, if he doesn't improve going into next season, and he's basically the same player where he's kind of afraid to shoot and he's not really doing anything else but kind of defending, then the trade value is going to stay the same. So they're kind of in a tough situation, but in my mind, it's a pretty easy situation in that even if the trade's not going to be the best trade possible, like the one that you probably should get for him, as long as you get one that's pretty close to that, it's not like terrible, but one that's pretty close, I think you might just have to take that. Because I think this team does need something to shake them up. They've needed it for the last couple seasons, but I think they really need it right now because, again, the championship window isn't open for much longer. You can't even really say it's open because they've only been to one. They haven't even been to a conference final, but it's hard to say that it's going to be how long it's going to be open for. It's probably not that much longer.
I agree, but I also slightly disagree in the fact that, yeah, I agree that they've needed to kind of change things for the past couple of years, but that was the time to do it. And now is not the time. I would keep him and I would see how he plays the first half of the season before the trade deadline. If his value increases, you can look to trade him before the trade deadline. I would imagine it wouldn't, just because it's only a half a year. And I think teams would want to see him in the playoffs again and maybe develop a shot, which hopefully he can. And if he can do that for a full year and not choke in the playoffs, and his team can look impressive in the playoffs and push the star-studded Nets. Honestly, you kind of hope the Nets are insanely good and that you can, push them to 6 and maybe push them to 7 or something. And Embiid looks insane and Simmons looks insane. And then you can actually start looking to trade Simmons. Of course, if that does happen, we're not going to be talking about trading Simmons because people weren't really seriously talking about trading Simmons a few years ago when maybe they should have been talking about it, or literally at least not nearly as much as they're talking about it now. That would be more ideal to me. And I think that's more likely than, trading Simmons for just a package that frankly, just to me doesn't do much for you. It doesn't move the needle. It just doesn't, it doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah. So I think we both, I think we both agree somewhat on the Simmons thing, and then we both disagree about, if they should actually trade him and what they should do for their future. But I think that's probably it for NBA. I just wanted to do something quick MLB. I think the last time we recorded, we can go over home run derby picks, but I don't think that we talked about, I think it happened like right after we recorded, which was Ronald Acuna tearing his ACL. I'm pretty sure it happened right after we recorded, so we didn't have a chance to talk about it. And then we'll get into our home run derby picks. But like I said, he tore his ACL. Happened right before the All-Star game. Again, if you wait a couple more days, then that injury possibly doesn't happen, which sucks to think about. But a Brave season, which has been a pretty lost season so far this year, coming off a Game 7 of the NLCS, in which they probably should have went to the World Series. To be honest, they're up 3-1 in that series. They're 44-45 right now, coming out of the All-Star break. It wasn't looking good for them anyways, just because of their lack of pitching. But obviously, without Acuna there for the rest of the season, and then most of next season, honestly, It's not. Yeah, I really would be surprised if they make the playoffs, especially since you basically have to win that division to make the playoffs because you're probably not going to be a wild card. So it just sucks for Acuna first, but then for the Braves, it just seems like a complete lost season for them overall.
Yeah, I agree. It's unfortunate. If they had still had Acuna, I mean, they still have a shot to win the division. They're only like 3-ish games back on the Mets, I want to say. So they still would have had a shot without Acuna. I mean, clearly they probably don't. I mean, maybe they do, but it's a Hail Mary. It's unfortunate. This division is just so tough that like, any injuries really is just not ideal. It sucks. I guess that's why, Acuna signed that contract a few years ago. I don't know if he didn't sign that contract, I still think he would have been able to get his whatever 10-year 400 million extension. Um, but clearly this is a reason why Acuna wanted to be able to sign his, just I don't need to maximize the money. I just want the security, and I want to secure the fact that my family can live like work free for however many generations. What I think it was like he signed like an $84 million contract, 8 years, 64 million, 8 years.
100 million for 8 years.
Yeah, like that was.
I
I mean, the
mean,
Braves. I mean, this isn't super related, but those contracts are the best contracts of like all time for a team. I mean, his contract and the Albies contract. What's the Albies one like? 40 million over however many years.
I
It's
think that one's like 65 million or something. I'm looking at right now. That one is 7 years, 35 million. Just crazy.
I mean, those are I that's it's insane. I mean, and I will say the Braves need to with this core need to win a championship, a World Series. They can't come away empty-handed when Acuna and Albies get old, because I mean those are insane contracts, and not to mention on top of it, it's Atlanta, and Atlanta has won what? When was the last time any team in Atlanta won a championship? I can't even remember it.
Well, it was the
Um,
Braves in 95 or 94.
okay, so that would be the last time. It's been a while. The Braves and Atlanta fans just have had nothing pretty much, you know, ever since 2016 or whatever, 2015, 2016, when they almost won that Super Bowl. So yeah, that's I guess that's my take on the Acuna injury.
Yeah, and I wasn't even thinking about that contract actually until you just brought that up. I kind of forgot about that, but yeah, I mean, 8 years, 100 million, just a complete steal of a contract. That was kind of like there's been a couple contracts like that. Like Chris Sale had a contract like that before he got to the Red Sox. There's been a couple contracts that have been like they signed early in their career just to get that money. Christian Yelich also had that till he signed his extension. So um, I mean, yeah, you get the money, but like for a guy like Acuna, even with this injury, if let's say he didn't sign that, he obviously would have still signed. He probably would have been signed already by now, but he obviously still would have signed, like a 300, $400 million contract. But I mean, obviously it sucks because, he was having a somewhat MVP type level this year, season this year. I think he was like 284 with like 26 homers. And obviously he's pretty good defensively. And I think my prediction for earlier this year, again, we could probably do another episode on this, but about our predictions, we talked about that last episode, but I think I said 50-50 for him, 50 homers, 50 stolen bases as like a really hot take. He was somewhat on that pace. I think he had 17 stolen bases and 26 homers or 24 homers. So he was somewhat on that pace, and then stolen bases would have been tough to get. But kind of looking back on that, that wasn't a terrible take, to be honest. Let's say if he stays healthy, he probably gets pretty close to that. But it definitely sucks though that injury happened. But I guess we can go over our home run derby picks. I guess I'll start. I had Matt Olson winning, and he lost in the first round. There was definitely some controversy for it though, because he went against Trey Mancini, and right, he went against Mancini, I'm pretty sure. And the clock went off before he got his last homer in, but they still counted it. And then he lost by one homer. So definitely some controversy. That happened a lot during the Derby, where like the clock would be zero, the buzzer would go off, they'd pitch, and then they count that homer. But then for some guys, they didn't. So somewhat of a protest on my pick, because I think it definitely could have been right, because I think Olsen had a really good chance at winning that. But I mean, obviously he didn't. But I still like my picking Matt Olson.
Yeah, I mean, I went with Soto. it was a scary pick because he was going against Shohei in the first round, and I could have definitely seen him losing to Shohei in the first round. Um, I guess I should have picked Pete Alonso. I mean, obviously, he's now won the last two, I guess, since the one before the year before this year was canceled. So he's won the last two home run derbies. I mean, he's a monster. I mean, there's not too much science to talk about the home run derby, but it's a fun event. It's one of the most fun things that baseball has. I was actually I wanted to say not necessarily to the home run derby, but I wanted to talk just like for a second about Shohei and just I hope the MLB utilizes Shohei well and markets him well because it's the only, I don't know what to call it, like lightning in a bottle that the MLB has had for the past however many years. It's just been a sport that's kind of been slowly dying and consumed by pretty much only old people who still have cable and kind of just have it on in the background. And other than that, there are people like us that may watch it, but our generation just doesn't care about it really. I think if you utilize Shohei well and market him well, it does kind of help that he's not on the Dodgers, but he's on the Angels, which is still an LA team technically, I guess, or I guess not technically, but basically an LA team. I'd like to see him marketed well and utilized well, and he can be a guy that could be a face of the league, maybe not the face of the league because it's tough. He's not the same race as everyone else watching, so they might not get the same. His English isn't great, so he may not be able to be the face of the league, but if he can be a face of the league, similar to like somebody like Giannis or something like that, I think that could kind of start to revive the sport and give it a little bit more juice because I think it's been pretty flat and I think it's been pretty boring to most people. And I think, if he can be marketed well, then
Yeah,
get more people 20 years old into it.
yeah. I mean, you kind of sound like Stephen A. Smith with that the English part right there, but
What do you mean? Well, I don't get
yeah,
it.
you heard what Stephen A. Smith said about Shohei.
No, I didn't.
Oh, that he couldn't be the face of baseball because he can't speak English.
Oh, is that what he said?
Yeah, I mean it's basically what he said. Yeah, he said it on First Take like a couple days ago.
Did he get like scrutized for it? I
Yeah,
mean, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah. He did. I didn't. You didn't hear that?
No, I
All over,
didn't. I'm
all over
surprised I
Twitter and
didn't.
everything. Yeah. I thought you would have. That's why when you said that, that's why I kind of started smiling because I thought you knew what you were saying there. But
I actually didn't. That's fun. I mean, it's true though, in a way. I mean, he can be a face. He can be on baseball's current Mount Rushmore. I don't know that he could be the face. Just like I don't know if Giannis could be the face. He can, but I think it's tougher. I just think it's tougher.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, and it definitely hurts that one, he's on the West Coast. Even if he was on the Dodgers, it hurts that he's on the West Coast because almost everything revolves around the East Coast. I mean, let's be honest. Like, they're 3 hours behind. So, like, to watch an Angels game, yeah, it's 10 o'clock here. By the time it ends, it's like 1 in the morning. So it's a lot tougher to be a bigger star in the West in baseball. I think in basketball, it's obviously different because basketball is more of a national sport, while baseball is more of a regional sport. Same with the NFL. It doesn't matter where you play. You could be as big of a star as you want. But for baseball, I think it does matter where location is. So even if he was on the Dodgers, it would definitely help more because it's the Dodgers. But I think it would still hurt because, I mean, Mike Trout's, even though, like I said, he's on the Angels. I mean, Mike Trout's been the best player in baseball the last decade. And I mean, like, yeah, most people wouldn't even know what he looks like, to be honest. So it's just, I think there's definitely tough with that. I don't think they did a great job with Trout, but I think with Shohei, they've done better. I think having him pitch and then hit in the All Star game, like batting leadoff, doing the Derby, I think they probably forced some of that on him, to be honest, and probably forced the Angels to let him pitch in that game. I know it was only 1 inning, but they had to have him pitch. It would have been huge if if he would have won the Derby. That would have been amazing for baseball if he would have won. He didn't. Going out in the first round was pretty tough, but
He still hit
still,
28 homers though.
yeah, still, I mean, he was terrible at the beginning, but he actually turned it on at the end. But it definitely would have been better if he would have won for the sport overall. But I think it was still a pretty successful weekend. I saw a number: the NBA All Star Game did around 6 million viewers. The MLB All Star Game did like 9 million. So people, NBA is definitely the more popular sport. But in terms of the All Star Game, I know it's technically different because the NBA, it's not like they're not actually trying. The MLB obviously still have to try when you play baseball, but to have 3 more million viewers than the NBA, where again, there's way more stars in the NBA than there are the MLB. I think that's pretty impressive for a sport like. And again, I agree with what you said that is dying among people our age. So I think that was pretty impressive.
No, 100%. That is impressive. I didn't hear those numbers. That is interesting. The Stephen A thing is interesting too.
Yeah, I thought you would have saw that. He said it on maybe it was Monday, probably Monday. It probably was, or no, it was yeah, or I don't
I mean,
know.
do you think you can be the face of the league without? I mean, there's a reason that like Charles Oliveira doesn't get nearly as much press as McGregor, Poirier, and I know they just fought, so that's kind of why. But McGregor, Poirier, even I guess Khabib to a certain extent.
Well, I almost always I do think UFC is a little different because you do have to know how to sell a fight. You do kind of have to be more talkative, unless you're just like I know he is a dominating fighter, but unless you're like Khabib dominating, you kind of have to be able to talk and sell a fight, kind of. Because even Poirier, like he's big, but if he didn't fight McGregor 3 times, not a lot of people really know who Dustin Poirier is. To be honest, that's the reason why we know McGregor is because he just knows how to sell fights. But I think he definitely could be the face of baseball. They have to market him the right way. Like they'd have to do it the right way, unlike what they've done the last couple of times with the bigger guys. And even without the English, I don't think it matters that much. I mean, if he's in again, baseballs to do a better job with commercials. That's the biggest thing. You always see everyone else in commercials. You don't really see baseball guys in commercials that much. So I think that's a big part of it. But having stuff like this, having him being the Derby, having him be in the All-Star game pitching and hitting, and then everyone could see that. It's the first guy, obviously, to do that in any of our lifetimes. So I think they definitely can do it with him, but it's going to be a challenge for baseball to do it, and they have to do it right, to be honest.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I know I say this every time we talk about baseball, almost every time, but they also need to like start taking like considering more rule changes. You can market Shohei as well as possible, and a bunch of the youth could grab and latch on to Shohei and want to be like him and want to be able to pitch and hit, and they can grasp onto heart like all these guys. But at the end of the day, if they try to watch a game that isn't the All-Star game, let's say you got 500,000 new fans or whatever. We'll just random number. You got 500,000 new fans from the All-Star game, and they thought it was entertaining because, of course, it's an All-Star game. You've got all these guys, Shohei and all this. But then they go to watch an Angels game, and they realize these games are boring, and that pitchers take forever to pitch, and that the games are 4 hours long, and that essentially the best way to watch baseball is to throw it on a second monitor and peek over every 20 seconds when they're actually about to throw the pitch. I mean, you're going to lose
Yeah.
400,000 of that 500,000 crowd. So I think you need to seriously start looking at more rule changes. I'm not going to, I could maybe do an episode later on the Clips channel about specific rule changes I have in mind, but even stuff they've implemented in the past that maybe we could take a look at, but they need to start seriously looking at overhauling it. I know the old heads will get really upset because, baseball is such a stats centered sport that you're going to mess up all these stats, all time homers, homers in a season, all the stats essentially are kind of almost thrown out the window, at least, in a season type stuff. But, it's either that or your sport continues to die. And when the people who are 40 and 50, when they're gone and they're not, watching sports anymore, people 30 and under, I don't think there's a very, very huge baseball crowd. It's going to be us and the other people who really, like baseball. But I mean, other than that, it's just there's not many baseball fans. There won't be.
Yeah, I think that would be a interesting video, like a rule change video. Because I've obviously thought of them. If you listen to like sports talk shows that like kind of focus a little bit on baseball, they definitely talk about them all the time. I mean, Manfred came out, over All-Star weekend and said there's gonna be no more 7 inning doubleheaders next year, and that there's gonna be probably no runner on second base. That one may stay, but probably not for extra innings. I kind of like those. Maybe not 7 inning doubleheaders all the time, but some of the time I think it does help out some of the teams instead of playing 2 full 9 inning doubleheaders. But again, we could definitely make a video on that on the Clips channel. I think that'd be a very interesting video to make. But yeah, baseball under 30, it's not a lot of people. It's definitely not. I mean, most of the people, like I definitely have some friends who enjoy baseball, but there's a lot who just don't care for it, or if they do, it's only when their team's in the playoffs. So it's just not a lot of people who are, and I don't expect people to watch every single game. Like I try and watch every single game, but I don't, expect people to do that. But there's not a lot of people who really know much about baseball, to be honest. So I do agree that they, and again, a new CBA I think is coming after this season. So there may even be a lockout, which will probably drive fans away again. So hopefully there's no lockout, because if there is, I just think more people to, turn baseball off even more.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. I was gonna say actually my first rule change would be honestly, let's instead of talking about the doubleheader thing, I don't know how many if you just got rid of the double headers and just said, okay, in situations where there would be a doubleheader, just get rid of it. Like how many games would that reduce? I think there should not be 162 games in a season. It's just too much. It's too much to keep up with for an average person where we have so many things surrounding you, so much social media, so many other sports as well. You're competing with other sports. Like, let's take it down to 140 off the like just next year 140. Then after that, we can start negotiating down from there all the way down to maybe one day we could get baseball down to 100 games. I think that would be beneficial for the league.
I mean, that's
It would
obviously
never
not going to
happen.
happen.
It would
But
never happen.
like
But
I mean, there's obviously been talk of like 150, but like even just one, even losing 12 games off a season, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but it's enough to make the owners not want to do it because they'd lose that much money, especially coming off a year like this where obviously they didn't make any money. You'd have to, and again, baseball makes a lot of money. They make like, I mean, they make in the billions like every year. I don't exactly know what the number is, but I mean, they make a good amount of money every single season, but just to lose 12 games, it has that much of an impact on the owners that they wouldn't even want to come close to doing it. So that's just the biggest issue. If they could somehow implement something where like they're not losing as much money, or maybe more playoff teams. Obviously, playoffs get more money. They could obviously do that, but it just shows how much of a big impact 12 games is, which is kind of ridiculous when you think about 162. How much is 12 games? But it's clearly just a big enough difference that they don't want to do it.
it's pretty much to me, as far as I'm aware, it just comes down to revenue. I mean, if the
Yeah.
owners are going to lose money, they just don't want to do that. And they may be blind. I don't know. To me, yeah, it's a clear you're taking a huge, I don't know if huge, but you're taking significant profit loss short term, but long term, if rule changes like those add up and you get to the point where you're actually getting new, viewers, then that's where you kind of start to, get that investment back and make more than you are now, just because again, your sport's going to die. I'm like, I think I just have to say it blunt like that. To me, if you took out the crowds from 40 and 40 plus, I don't think this may not even be a top four biggest sport in the US right now, just from ages 0 to 40. If 0 to 20, definitely to me. I think from ages 0 to 20, I think there are many more people entertained with soccer. I mean, I hear more about soccer than I do baseball from ages 0 to 20. And I don't think it should be that way in the US, at least. Maybe it should. Maybe soccer is a better sport. I don't know, but I'm just in the U.S. baseball. There's no way baseball should be the fifth most popular sport.
Yeah. I mean, maybe soccer, like overseas soccer, I guess you could say is probably more popular, even in the US. I mean, obviously worldwide, but even in the US, I guess you could say so. But yeah, for baseball to, basically be on the edge of like fourth, fifth, that's just, I mean, that's bad. I mean, they should be bigger than the NHL, and they're probably about similar, to be honest. Like, I don't exactly know what those numbers would be, but they're probably about similar, which is just concerning because they're both regional sports, but like baseball is the bigger sport. So you would just assume that they'd be the more popular sport, but I really don't think it's that much of a difference between the two.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
100% agree. They should be much bigger than
yeah.
hockey.
But I think that's probably about it, right? Unless do you have anything else?
Yeah, no, that's pretty much it. Feel free to check out everything in the description. Social media is all that. Appreciate everybody stay to the end of this video. Clips channel. I'm gonna try to get a couple more uploads up soon on that channel. Maybe with Brandon, maybe it's by myself, maybe it's just with Brandon. I don't know. We'll see. But appreciate everybody. Stay to the end. We will be back probably after game 5.